The best of the morning X99X.
We have a someone you should know, and I don't really know how to describe what Rusty Haight does other than to say he is a human crash test dummy.
This is wild.
I thought they had machines
you talk
that did
about
this.
You talk about the kind of job where people say, "What that?" You see guys working in sewers and stuff, and you say, "Who the hell would take that kind of job?" Or guys who work at the top of buildings, and what kind of nutcase would get a job where you got to dangle off the edge of a building? How about a guy who it's his job to strap himself in and crash cars, right?
Pretty much, yeah.
Well, I mean, I thought they had machines. They always show those little guys with the yellow and black stuff on them.
Right. That's the first question. Why do we need human crash test dummies? What do you do, or what can you provide that the real dummies cannot? And I don't, when I call you a dummy, I mean it in the most affectionate terms. What kind of information, Rusty, do you give these researchers that the dummies can't?
Well, a lot of times when I'm running these crashes, it's not so much to get the human subject stuff as it is to create a crash that I can use to teach police officers and engineers more about accident investigation. That's really what I do, is I teach cops and engineers about what's called accident reconstruction or accident investigation.
How many bones have you broken in your body? You must be snapping.
Actually, I've never broken anything doing crashes. I've been hurt more scuba diving than I have in my car wreck.
You're kidding.
Well, now, explain a typical crash. How fast will you go in a typical crash?
Well, I don't think there's anything that could be called typical. I mean,
Okay.
I've gone as fast now as 44 miles an hour into another car, but these are things that are planned, so I'm planning them not to get hurt. I mean, the whole idea behind reconstruction is you understand how things happen after the crash, and so if you can get that right, you should be able to plan a crash so you don't get hurt.
How long does the whole process take? I imagine, you're seeing your life flash before you. It's kind of like a slow motion thing.
Yeah,
I mean,
you see your life
How long does it take?
Well, milliseconds. I mean, the crash is over in typically under 2 seconds by the time the cars come to rest and all the dust starts to settle. But you're absolutely right. Everything goes in slow motion. And the weirdest part, having been in enough of these now, is you don't really remember the detail that you hear a lot of folks claim that they remember. And I try real hard to think about,
Sure.
Okay, watch this, see if this happens. And I just get bits and pieces out of all these. It's kind of like overload.
Are you just hitting a wall, or what are you hitting?
Oh, no. I drive into other cars. We'll look at, for example, the strength of cars, front end of one to the side of another. We'll look at, cars versus pedestrians. I've got a real dummy. That's kind of an oxymoron with me, huh? Anyway, I use like a regular stand-up plastic dummy that we run over with a car and to teach the fellows about how a body moves when it's struck by a car.
But now, are you just strapped in with a regular passenger seatbelt, or are you reinforced more than a normal vehicle?
Well, if I'm going to get, I don't want to say crazy, but if I'm going to get into some of the crazier speeds, then I carry my own seatbelts with me and I install them in the car. Otherwise, if we're doing something where we're actually looking at human subject tolerance, where I got to have something that resembles a real world scenario, then I'll wear my own I'll wear the normal installed seatbelts.
Have you ever been in a real accident?
Oh, a couple. As a matter of fact, one of my first crashes, I think my first crash was just outside of Atlanta.
Really?
Oh, yeah?
Must be old hat to you when you have just a regular wreck. Oh, okay.
I know, it's like, well, geez. Well, actually, we made a decision. It doesn't count toward my record if we don't have video.
Uh-huh. Now, what do you wear in a crash?
Typically, just a jumpsuit, and then, although I've done some in just like a T-shirt and shorts if we were trying to put instrumentation on my body and we needed, like a clear shot at my leg, if you will. But jumpsuit and a bulletproof vest front, down low where the seatbelt catches across the lower part of my belly. That prevents a lot of potential injury down there. And then beyond that, it just kind of depends on the crash. And
Headgear?
who?
Headgear? Helmets?
Not usually. I have as a joke, I have a crash dummy mask that I wear now and again. That's more for a laugh than anything else, although it does keep the glass out of my face when I'm running into pedestrian bodies.
Well, I know it's controlled, but, I mean, there's got to be something that you maybe don't factor in or some...
Right.
I mean, yeah, there has to be a variable in these crashes that,
that is not calculated or calculatable.
You're absolutely right. There's always the unknown, and the other day I did one up in Columbia in South Carolina, and I'll tell you what, at the end of the day I was a little sore. It was a pretty gnarly crash. It was 44 miles an hour, took a Crown Vic and put it in the side of a Chevette, and made the Chevette into a Chev. But it was pretty gnarly. I was sore the next day. There's things you can't really always count on, so you got to still be careful.
44 miles an hour, that is fast.
Yeah, it was pretty wild inside the car, let me tell you.
What's your opinion of police car chases?
Ooh, gosh, I was a cop, and I teach cops now, and I'm in favor of doing them because in the greater picture, in the larger picture, you got to stop the guy because you don't really know what he's out there doing or has done, and you got to weigh that against the few crashes, relatively speaking, that result in an innocent bystander tragedy. I think if you look at the total number of police pursuits, in the thousands that result in an apprehension, and compare that to the relatively few that end up in an unfortunate tragedy, you gotta keep doing it. I really think it's important. Otherwise, everybody's going to run, and we're never going to catch the bad guys.
Talking to Rusty Haight, who is a real-life crash test dummy. He crashes cars for a living, sometimes 40 or 50 times a day. You ever have cases before when you were dealing with some of these wrecks where maybe a couple of guys were in a wreck and one of them died, and the living guy was maybe trying to say that he wasn't driving when he really was?
Oh, gosh, that never happens. That happens all the time, and it's typically about 2:30 in the morning where the drunk guy who's still alive says that his dead buddy was the driver.
Really? That does? I mean, people just try to lie their way out of it?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, that's unbelievably common.
How do you prove that they were the driver?
Well, there's a lot of things you can do to prove they were driving. For example, you look for injuries on the person that's still alive. You look for injuries, external injuries on the guy that's dead, and try to compare those to things in the car. For example, a guy that puts his head into the windshield is going to leave some skin and hair, and you can match that up to to a certain person.
Do a DNA match.
Well, even just looking at the color sometime and looking at the piece of skin missing on the guy's forehead and the piece of skin in the windshield and say, in police work we call that a clue. So, you can tie them back together that way.
What does your family think of this?
Well, my oldest boy here at home, he's 12. He's sitting there actually listening as we speak, ready to go to school, and he's ridden in a couple of the low-speed things with me, and when I run over pedestrians, and he thinks it's pretty cool. My wife, she's kind of half and half on it.
When you say you run over pedestrians,
they're plastic dummies.
Are they plastic dummies, or are there people even crazier than you whose job it is to get hit by cars?
Say
you know what I'm saying?
Well, actually, no, I don't want to run over a person. I had a stuntman from Hollywood volunteer one time, and I thought, this is just crazy. And then right after that, we saw some video of a guy that was doing one of those Crime Stoppers things.
Right.
And he became basically a vegetable after getting hit by a car as a pedestrian.
No, I don't doubt it. I want to ask you a little bit about, first of all, airbags, because I'm guessing you don't use airbags in your crashes, because wouldn't your face constantly get beaten in?
No, actually, you know what? I love airbags. I think those are the greatest things. And that one I was telling you about, the one I did in South Carolina here a few days ago, actually last week, one of the purposes of that one was to demonstrate how an airbag works. And I'm a huge fan of airbags. Now, you're right. I could be putting my face in a lot of airbags, but I'm pretty tall. I'm 6 foot, and I don't sit with my nose in the middle of the steering wheel, and I don't have to look when I'm driving. I don't have to look under the steering wheel ring, and so I'm not so close that it's going to be a problem. And the ones you see on TV are dummies that are abnormally close.
Well, but isn't it true that people under a certain height are in definitely greater danger of being seriously injured by an airbag than people who are 6 feet?
Oh, absolutely, and it's because they're sitting so close to that bag. That bag comes out just incredibly fast.
Oh, yeah.
It's like getting punched by 1,000 Tysons, you know?
How tall, and this is probably helpful to people, how short, I should say, do you think you can be before it's time to think about disconnecting those airbags?
Well, see, I'm a believer in the idea you don't want to disconnect them. Instead, you want to get pedal extenders. And you can order those on the internet from a number of companies, for shorter people. But there's really no absolute height because, some people have a short torso and long legs. The key there is you don't want to be really close to the center of the steering wheel. I'm a believer in the idea that about 10 to 12 inches is a minimum from the center of the steering wheel to where your body is normally is a good range to start with.
And there's a lot of talk about, I drive a Jeep, and I know Barnes drives an SUV too, and one of the reasons I've always liked driving them is because I feel a little bit safer being higher up. Is that a fallacy, or is there some truth there? Are smaller cars inherently more dangerous?
Well, I drive a Suburban. Not to endorse Suburbans, but I drive a Suburban myself. The idea there is bigger is better.
It is.
Okay, you see the commercials, wider? No. Bigger is better. If you're driving down the road in 5,500 pounds of steel and you hit the Yugo weighing in at 2,000 pounds, who's going to win?
They're done. Hey, we have to let you go in a second, but we have a question from Bill first. Hey, Bill.
Yeah.
You're on with Rusty.
Hey.
Hiya, Bill.
I have a question. How do you get to do this for a living?
Bill, you sound like the kind of guy who's cut out for this too. I gotta tell
Hey,
you.
I have run more than one vehicle into a tree on purpose at 65 miles an hour.
On purpose.
Yeah. And,
Yeah,
and
well,
Doing your own research there, are you?
yeah, I can't go into the details, but I have.
no, seriously, why have you
swear to
done
God.
that? Why have you done that?
Bill, you got me beat.
I can't go into details, but I swear to God, I've done it.
Insurance scam? What are you doing?
Yeah, I mean, what do you mean you can't go into details? Are you-
Well, yeah, that's the reason. Yeah, I mean,
It was an insurance. Okay, yeah, you better not go into
yeah,
detail.
Rusty wants you in his profession.
Rusty, how can this man get into this line of work?
You know, I managed to get into it because I'm teaching cops, and we use it to demonstrate to those guys. I've taught there in Forsyth, there in Georgia, for the highway patrol. They're a bunch of good guys, and we do it there to demonstrate the dynamics of crashes. So it just became part of my job. I kind of just fell into it. It's like everything else in life, right place, right time.
You kind of just drove into it, right?
Just, it ran
I
into
drove
it.
into it.
All right. Hey, thank you very much for coming on, Rusty.
My pleasure, guys. Have a good day.
Rusty, the human crash test dummy. I guess somebody's got to do it.
I think probably he'd rather be referred to as a crash investigator.
The best of the Morning X. 99X.